If you're considering pre-ordering the 2021 iPad Pro, but you're not sure if it's the right choice, which model to go with, or maybe you're considering getting an older model, we're gonna talk about all the options because Apple made this decision a little bit more complicated than usual. I also think, cliffhanger, that Apple hasn't told us the whole story yet, and we'll get back to that. And finally, there was another thing that Apple snuck in there that got a lot of current iPad Pro users really upset. So let's look at the upgrades, see how they compare to previous models, put them in context with a few other devices, and then talk about specific use cases so you can decide what's the best fit for you. Starting out with what's new, there are a few major differences that I want to quickly cover and then put in perspective. Like if you want more information, you should check out my first video about the 2021 iPad Pro and get a more complete overview. Now the biggest change for me is the new display. Now, instead of the liquid retina display that we have on the 2018 and the 2020 iPad Pro, we're getting an updated mini LED display that Apple calls a Liquid Retina XDR display. It has 10,000 mini LEDs with 1,000 nits full screen brightness and 1,600 nits peak brightness in HDR. The new display also offers a 1,000,000:1 contrast ratio. I'm really excited about the 1,000 nits of brightness because that will make the new iPad Pro work better when you're outside or working in brighter environments. And as a point of reference, the display on the M1 MacBook Air is 400 nits and the one on the MacBook Pro is 500 nits. So the new iPad will be twice as bright as the MacBook Pro. Now the rest of the features, True Tone, DCI-P3 color gamut, Pro Motion, which is Apple's adaptive 120 Hz refresh rate, fingerprint resistance, and anti-reflective coating, all of those are available on the 2018 and the 2020 models. And of course, at this point, we're only going by what Apple says. I will be pre-ordering it as soon as it's available, but I haven't seen the display yet in real life. So while I'm not disappointed in any way with the display on my current iPad Pro, the 2020, if you want the best display that Apple has ever put on an iPad, you'll want the 2021 12.9-inch iPad Pro. It's the only one that offers it. The 2021 11-inch iPad Pro still has the same Liquid Retina display that we had on previous models. Now there are other reasons why you may want the 11-inch model, but the display isn't one of them. Remember that I said that Apple hasn't told us the whole story? Well, I haven't forgotten about that yet, but the next major upgrade to the 2021 iPad Pro is that it uses the new M1 chip that we saw on the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro, and the Mac Mini. And it's the same chip that we're getting in the new iMac. And I'm so excited about the new iMac, like I can't wait. We're gonna talk about the design in my next video. Don't you worry about it. I read all your comments about the chin. I'm ready to talk about it. Now back to the iPad Pro. You see, I love tech so much, I'm always distracted by some other shiny piece of gear. So focus, iPad Pro with the M1 chip. Now, some of you may be wondering why I said that the display was the biggest upgrade when the M1 chip is a giant leap forward from the A12Z chip on the 2020 iPad Pro. And before I get to that, we're not just getting better processing power, we're also getting, at the very least, 2 additional gigabytes of RAM and storage that's 2 times faster. Now, the M1 chip on the iPad Pro is available in the same configurations that we saw with the M1 MacBook Pro. The 128, 256, and 512 gigs of storage come with 5 gigs of RAM, and the 1 and 2 terabyte versions of the new iPad Pro comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM. To do a projection of processing power, I compared Geekbench scores between the M1 MacBook Air and the 2020 iPad Pro, where the MacBook Air crushed the iPads with 1721 versus 1120 for single-core performance and 7501 versus 4694 for multi-core performance. And I used the MacBook Air instead of the MacBook Pro because I didn't want anyone to think that the fan potentially played a part in the results. Now, if you want to know how the 2020 iPad Pro compared to the M1 MacBook Pro, it's very similar, 1721 versus 1120 for single-core and 7564 versus 4694 for multi-core. In both cases, you see that you're going to get an absurd improvement in performance. So why do I think this is not as important as a display upgrade? Because the majority of users, yes, even iPad users, already don't push their iPads to the limits of the A12Z chip. So it's hard for me to recommend that you spend money just for additional processing power. Now, a few counterpoints there. Like if you're one of those users that does max out your processor for things like photo and video editing, or any other processor-intensive task, then by all means, this new iPad Pro is for you. I've got a ton of videos on this channel talking about the Mac Mini, the MacBook Air, and the MacBook Pro, so you know how impressed I am by the new SoC architecture on the M1. Now, another advantage of this new iPad is additional RAM. So if you're a heavy Procreate user, for example, and you might say, Sigi, I want all the RAM that I could possibly get. See, that makes sense to me. Then again, the new iPad Pro is a good fit. Now, some users are also going to want the faster transfer speeds of up to 40 gigabits per second that come with the new Thunderbolt port. That replaces the USB-C port on the 2020 iPad Pro. This new port is the fastest and most versatile port on any iPad, and it opens the door to a wider variety of higher performance accessories like higher resolution external displays, Thunderbolt docks, and faster external SSDs. Speaking of, if you're interested in my external SSD test, I did a comparison with some of the most popular models. One of them went up to 2800 megabits per second, and I'll link to that video at the end of this one. Now let's get to Apple not telling us the whole story. And this is just what I think, but I think that adding the M1 chip to the iPad Pro as an endgame just isn't enough. I just can't see a large enough segment of users that would take advantage of all this processing power with the existing parameters of iPad OS. So I think in June at WWDC, we're gonna get some interesting news. See, just adding the M1 chip to the iPad Pro doesn't in and of itself mean that you can run macOS apps like Final Cut, Logic, and Xcode. Those apps would still need to be ported over to UIKit in order for them to work. And I think that's coming. Now, before I get to what upset a lot of people, this is what I hope Apple adds. I would love to see some additional upgrades when it comes to multitasking, even a Samsung DeX-like option. I'd love to see better external display support with extended desktop rather than just the current mirroring. And definitely, without question, get rid of the black bars on the side. Give us full external display support. Also, I hope that they add the ability to reference photo and video files on external drives while editing. And this way, you don't have to copy the files over onto the iPad in order to work with them. Now, the next noteworthy upgrade to the iPad Pro is 5G. And I'm a little conflicted about this. I guess it comes down to workflow. I'm always on Wi-Fi, like literally 99% of the time. And when I'm not, I'm just gonna tether off my iPhone. So I don't usually buy the cellular model of tablets. There's also the matter of 5G availability in every area and which band is available. So I think 5G is nice to have on an iPad Pro, but I'm curious to see how this plays out with the iPad Pro audience. Now we can get to what upset a lot of existing iPad Pro users, and I can definitely see why. In terms of dimensions, the 2021 12.9-inch iPad Pro is virtually identical to the 2020 model. And that's to say that you wouldn't be able to really tell the difference. You couldn't tell them apart if you just saw them. They are the same height and width with only a 0.02 inches or 0.5 millimeter difference in depth and 0.09 pounds, which is like 41 grams difference in weight. The problem is that according to the leaks, this small change, while having no impact on actual user experience, makes the iPad Pro incompatible with previous versions of the Magic Keyboard. And if that's true, and you spent $350 on a Magic Keyboard and you just want to upgrade to the 2021 12.9-inch model, you need to be prepared to spend another $350 on a new Magic Keyboard. And of course, we got a new color of the Magic Keyboard in white, and it looks awesome, but I can totally understand why users are frustrated. Now, looking at the Apple website, the new Magic Keyboard is compatible with the previous models of the iPad Pro, and the leaks mentioned something about the additional depth of the iPad Pro causing a problem with fit because of the way the Magic Keyboard closes. What I'm curious about is if a tight and secure fit is so important, and it is. I don't want my iPad Pro falling out of the Magic Keyboard. But if it's so important, how tight of a fit are we gonna get with the new Magic Keyboard with the thinner, older models? So I'll get one, I'll test it, I'll let you know. Now the 11-inch iPad Pro model will have no problems fitting into the older Magic Keyboard because it's using the same liquid Retina display, so there's no change in dimensions. I'm going to quickly talk about the new camera features and then we'll get to who should get what. You're probably sitting there thinking, Sigi, you never focus on any camera features for any tablets that you review. And you're right, you are. But in addition to the image signal processing upgrades that we're getting with the M1 chip, which bring things like smart HDR3 support and should improve the performance on every camera on the iPad Pro, we're also getting a new true depth front-facing camera. This new 12 megapixel camera, which is a significant upgrade over the previous 7 megapixel camera, now has 122-degree field of view and a 2-time optical zoom. This enables a new feature called center stage, which uses machine learning to reframe your shot in real time and keep you centered in the frame. This is like having the iPad Pro on a tripod with a camera person behind it that's following you. It will also automatically detect the fact that a new person came into the frame and then make the adjustments to properly incorporate them into the frame. I'm really excited to see how this works in real life. Look, the demo is cool, but I can't wait to show you samples as soon as I can. Okay, so which iPad Pro should you get? If you want to save money, don't need the largest display, but want to get the absolute best performance, most future-proof device, then I would recommend the 2021 11-inch iPad Pro. You're still getting the M1 chip with that huge upgrade in processing power. You can still get more and faster storage, the upgraded Thunderbolt port, and the new camera features, and it starts at $799. If you prioritize display size over absolute peak performance, because like the vast majority of users, you're not going to push your iPad to the extreme, then check out the 2020 12.9-inch iPad Pro or even the 2018 model. A lot of people sleep on this old model, but if you don't need the upgrades that the 2020 iPad Pro brought, then it still gives you that same form factor and display. Now, if you want everything, you want the best display, the most processing power, the new M1 chip, more RAM, and more storage, then get the 2021 12.9-inch iPad Pro. It's an awesome option, and I'll be publishing a lot of content about it as soon as I get mine, and I can't wait to see what this display looks like in real life. Hopefully this video was helpful. Click on my face to subscribe and then watch one of these videos. You know what I always say? Buy it nice or buy it twice. Good luck and see you soon.